ฝากกดติดตามและกดไลค์กดแชร์ CBN Thailand
Eileen Tan is a trauma nurse. Still, no amount of training could have prepared her for what she faced the morning she woke up to find her husband, Jim, unresponsive. He was foaming at the mouth with a glazed look on his face. In the next few seconds, Jim's condition went from bad to worse.
It was early in the morning when Eileen Tan was awakened by her husband, Jim, who was making strange noises.
So I nudged him and I said, hey, you didn't wear your CPAP. And there was still no response.
That's when Eileen, a critical care nurse for 26 years, pulled open the curtains to check on him.
He was like mildly purple. Eyes were open, darted to the upper left-hand side. And so I gave him a quick slap on his cheek and he wouldn't respond to me. At that moment, I thought he was having a stroke.
She shouted to her daughter Simone to call 911. Seconds later,
this was the moment I saw Jim's eyes roll back and just like having this glazed look on his face. And I felt for a pulse, and there was no pulse.
Eileen realized the signs didn't point to a stroke, but to a heart attack. She and Simone lowered Jim to the floor, and Eileen quickly started CPR.
I knew I was losing him with each minute that was passing by.
After a few chest compressions, Jim's tongue slipped back, blocking his airway. Eileen grabbed a rolled-up towel and placed it under his neck, forcing the airway clear. She continued giving CPR, praying she could get a pulse.
I remember distinctly talking to the Lord that I was like, this is not how I want him to go. Not this way. This is not the last time I'm going to see him like this. And every minute counts when you don't have a pulse.
8 minutes later, paramedics arrived and shocked Jim's heart. The portable monitor showed he was in VFib, meaning his pulse was weak and erratic. Eileen knew it was a precursor to cardiac arrest.
The first thing that came to my mind was I felt like I had already lost half of him. The chances of him coming back was very, it was tiny.
EMTs shocked Jim again, yet couldn't get a steady heartbeat.
At this point, I remember taking a step back towards the door because I was like, oh, he's gone.
Then a third shock gave Jim a small, steady pulse.
His right hand came up to his chest, like clutching his chest in pain. And so this gave me hope because I knew that was purposeful movement.
Now stable, Jim was rushed to Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital. Even though Eileen worked at the same hospital, she wasn't allowed to go in because of COVID restrictions. She stayed home and started texting family and friends to pray for her husband.
My greatest worry was like, what if he has brain damage? What if he becomes paralyzed? What if he becomes dependent on a ventilator and has to be institutionalized? I was just numb at this moment. I really didn't feel like it was happening. I couldn't believe what was going on. I was just standing there and I'm like, I still couldn't process it that this was all happening.
A short time later, the cardiologist called and informed Eileen that Jim was stable and awake. Although his arteries were clear, they had to put him on medication to make sure his heartbeat remained steady. That afternoon, the two were able to FaceTime with each other.
That was probably one of the happiest moments during the whole entire day, was to talk to him over the phone. Because that was my greatest concern and fear, was damage to his brain. And he was actually making sense. Tired, but making sense.
However, Jim still needed prayer. Unsure of what caused the attack, doctors took him off medication and observed him overnight to see if he would go into VFib again.
I sat on the floor of our kitchen, and that's when I sobbed. That was the first time I actually cried that night. I was so scared that he was going to arrest again. Even if he was in the ICU, it was no guarantee they were going to get him back.
Jim made it through the night without incident.
I felt really weak when I woke up. Scared a bit, but more or less on the concerned part. But somehow I just put it on the Lord. I said, Lord, you're in control. Yeah.
His doctors determined there was an electrical issue with his heart. So the next day, they transferred him to a different hospital where he was fitted for a pacemaker and defibrillator to prevent further attacks. On July 18th, just 3 days after the incident, Jim was released to go home.
God literally plucked me out of the jaws of death. I just feel blessed. I just feel loved by the Lord. I just feel loved, that our family is loved, my family loves me, and that God is in control.
For him to actually come home and to physically see him come home, like, was a joyful part of the journey. We were just so excited. I guess because we knew that a couple of days ago he would have been dead.
That's because at the time of the attack, the family was supposed to be vacationing in a remote area of Croatia where rescue help could not reach them in time. Instead, they'd stayed home because COVID restrictions had forced them to cancel the trip.
We don't believe the word in coincidence. It was a miracle.
A few weeks later, Jim was again enjoying his daily 5-mile walks, his family, and his life. The Tans believe he's a walking miracle and share about God's goodness every chance they get.
God is alive. God works today. God, He exists. He will never leave you or forsake you. Just trust Him.
I just want to remind people that our God still reigns supreme. No matter what the news tells you, no matter what you see in the world, no matter how cold the world seems to be, that doesn't change the fact that He is still sovereign.